Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to tackle a topic that is just deeply personal and, frankly, genuinely transformative. We're talking about the critical concepts of self-love, emotional boundaries, and honestly, ending a cycle that so many of us are trapped in without even realizing it. We're exploring the massive shift from chronic self-abandonment to building what we're going to call emotional wealth. It's this absolutely fascinating framework that completely reframes how you look at your own energy, your boundaries, and your everyday interactions. So let's get right to it.
So I want to ask you a question. Are you endlessly pouring from an empty cup? Just kind of sit with that for a second. Do you feel that subtle creeping burnout from constantly putting everyone else's needs ahead of your own? So often we completely confuse self-abandonment with love. We really do. We think that if we just give enough or help enough or sacrifice enough, we're proving how much we care. But the source material highlights this brutal truth. If your own heart is literally starving for peace, rest, compassion, and care, eventually you're going to burn out trying to save everyone around you. There's just no way around it.
Which brings us to Section 1, the myth of selfishness and unlearning what we were taught.
Now, what's really interesting about this comparison is how it highlights our societal conditioning. So many of us were explicitly taught that putting ourselves first was just arrogant. We were conditioned to pour into everyone else, completely ignoring our own exhaustion, our own wounds, and our own hearts. But here's the thing. Loving yourself isn't arrogance. It's not selfishness. It's a fundamental responsibility. Look at the stark contrast between these two entirely different ways of giving. When you ignore your own needs, you aren't pouring from a place of love anymore. You're pouring from survival mode. That's when resentment, exhaustion, numbness, and disconnection start quietly creeping in. But when you protect your energy, when you actually prioritize the profound importance of self-love and heal without apologizing for it, your cup gets full. And the love you give others, it changes completely. It becomes genuine, it's steady, it's sustainable. You stop loving people from a place of total depletion, and you start loving them from a place of wholeness.
This brings us to a really beautiful, defining realization from our source text. Taking care of your own soul was never the betrayal. Abandoning yourself was. Wow. We've had it backwards for so long, haven't we? Society literally taught us to give until we break, making us feel guilty for simply taking a nap or setting a boundary. But the ultimate betrayal was never taking a moment for yourself. It was actively ignoring your own heart just to keep everyone else comfortable. It is absolutely time to start speaking kindly to yourself again and resting without that heavy, lingering guilt.
Moving on to Section 2, introducing emotional wealth. This is a whole new paradigm for your energy.
So if pouring from an empty cup is basically emotional bankruptcy, well, we need a solution, right? We need to shift our perspective away from that emotional depletion and into a highly practical, empowering new framework. Enter emotional wealth. This is defined as a mindset where you treat your moods like currency, saving, investing, and avoiding overspending on the wrong things. Think about how much we obsess over our bank accounts. We track every single penny, we panic over fraudulent charges, we constantly worry about our savings, but we completely ignore our emotional ledger. Our source notes that emotions behave exactly like money. The more recklessly you spend them, the faster you run completely dry. But the more intentionally you manage them, the wealthier you feel inside. It's really about treating your internal energy with the exact same financial prudence you'd apply to your life savings.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly where our emotional currency actually goes. We aren't usually going bankrupt in these huge, dramatic movie scene ways. It's the subtle day-to-day exhaustion. Look at this breakdown. 35% is just spent on unnecessary drama, 30% on toxic people, 20% chasing validation from people we don't even need it from, and 15% just replaying conversations in our heads. It's wild. This is exactly how we overspend. We literally hemorrhage our energy on the wrong things, leaving absolutely nothing left in the bank for ourselves, our own growth, or the people who actually matter. We are financing our own burnout by paying attention to things that offer zero return on investment.
Let's move to Section 3 and see how this builds. Stop overspending your energy. It's time to start budgeting your feelings.
Because recognizing the drain is really only the first step. Now we have to talk about the practical application of this financial metaphor. Every single argument, every unnecessary online debate with a stranger, every replayed conversation, it all costs you emotional coins. Every time you engage in these draining behaviors just to prove a point or to defend yourself against someone who is frankly committed to misunderstanding you, you are actively opening your emotional wallet and handing over your extremely limited currency. You're paying for it out of your own well-being. This is the very definition of self-abandonment, valuing someone else's perception of you over your own internal peace.
And why does that matter so much? Because of this number right here, 0. 0 represents how much credit is available for your feelings. Because unlike real money, there are absolutely no credit cards for your energy. You can't take out a loan on your mental health. You only have what you've got. When you hit 0, you burn out, you crash. You end up right back in that dark place of resentment and numbness we talked about earlier.
So, saving your emotional wealth means learning the absolute value of restraint. And here's how we do it. First, you do not need to respond to every text right away. I know, crazy, right? But immediate accessibility is just a modern myth that completely drains our reserves. Second, you don't need to pick a fight just because you feel provoked. Honestly, silence is often the most lucrative investment you can possibly make. And third, and this is perhaps the most important one, you do not need to carry other people's emotional burdens. If a burden was never yours to hold in the first place, you have got to stop convincing yourself that it's your responsibility. Taking on pain that isn't yours doesn't make you a savior. It is the ultimate form of self-abandonment. It prevents the other person from growing, and it completely bankrupts your soul. This is how you start actually budgeting your feelings.
So the crucial point is coming up here in Section 4, the cost of peace, and moving from anger to clarity.
Once you stop bleeding emotional currency everywhere, you really start seeing the return on investment of choosing yourself. You transition from being angry about how depleted you are to having this absolute, unapologetic clarity about your life. Just consider the contrast between our old mindset and our new one here. In the old mindset, we were seeking validation, attention, and applause. We were literally shrinking ourselves so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable around our growth. We were acting entirely out of obligation. But in this new mindset of emotional wealth, we stopped trying to be understood by people who never took the time to truly see us anyway. Instead, we seek alignment. We embrace unapologetic growth. We look for true, authentic connection. We're just no longer trying to prove anything. Ending self-abandonment is absolutely necessary if you ever want to achieve genuine connection and peace. Because you can't deeply connect with someone else if you've disconnected from yourself.
Which leads us to this incredibly powerful realization from the author. Peace is expensive, and I can't keep paying for it with my soul. Just think about every time you stayed silent just to keep the peace. Every single moment you abandoned yourself trying to make everyone else comfortable in the room. That fake peace has a massive price tag. And paying for it with your spirit, your joy, and your energy, that is a cost that is simply far too high to bear anymore.
Finally, we reach Section 5, choosing yourself this season, making a personal and sacred shift.
So we've identified the drain, right? We've learned to budget our emotional coins, and we've recognized the true cost of false peace. Now we enter a deeply personal, really sacred season of life where we completely stop apologizing for protecting our energy. Here is your new bottom line. If something brings joy, alignment, truth, peace, or real connection, you say yes, absolutely. But if it costs your mental health, your spirit, or your self-respect, you simply say no thanks. We are completely done pouring into people, places, and situations that leave us totally drained while falsely calling it love, loyalty, or obligation.
So I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought. What are you buying with your emotional currency today? Are you investing it in your healing, in genuine connection, and in your own soul? Or are you spending it on drama, proving a point, and trying to please people who don't truly see you? Stop paying for peace with your soul. Protect your energy, fill your cup, and start building true emotional wealth today. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this gave you something to think about. See you next time.